Welcome in. A very good Sunday morning to you. I'm Big Race Jim. You're watching Past the Wire TV. This is Sunday Morning Coffee brought to you by our good friends at Shorebet Coffee and AmWager. Woke up this morning, was watching replays through the AmWager platform of the Virginia Oaks and the Virginia Derby, getting a couple of sips of that Shorebet coffee in, and fine races. They were fine. It's kind of crazy to see like one turn, mile and a 16th, mile and an eighth races. You don't get that too often. So that was neat. Um, Not sure anybody really impressed me. Maybe that rendered judgment that finished second. Uh, and we'll talk about that race here in a little bit. I was just trying to compare a lot of what I saw in those two races to um, what we charted out in the pace point sheet that was available over the weekend as well, 2 weekends in a row on Pass the Wire TV. So hopefully you guys have been checking those out and using them. They've been free. And we'll talk through it here in our second segment as we break down what we saw in these races. But let's dive in. Let's kick it off with the Virginia Oaks, and Fondly looked, um, you know, reasonably respectable. Oh, wrong race. My bad. Here we go. We'll get to Getaway Car in a minute. But here's Fondly, and she puts a couple of lengths on this field right out of the gate, which I thought was smart. Um, she was better than this field, um, and I always like to say this all the time. You want to be aggressive. Like, horses want to be aggressive, so let them be aggressive. Like, I think this for Anonima is a perfect example of this. They're probably like, oh shoot, if we don't get up there, Fondly's just gonna control this whole race and go on and be an easy winner. And Icona Mama ran up there and put her nose in front. There really wasn't a ton in the past performances to suggest that she would want to be forwardly placed like this, or at least have the speed to be forwardly placed like this. But to her credit, it worked out to her advantage, as she was able to, you know, just finally faded in the last couple of strides. But I thought that was a smart move by Anonima, and right here, you thought maybe she was home free, but Fondly, just a better racehorse, just a better racehorse, and was able to wear her down and and get the victory here. I looked like Anonymous finished third, but still, like, that move to me was smart, and you know, I don't think Anonymous in Oaks winner by any stretch, but that would be one that I would definitely want to keep an eye on moving forward, given that tactic and her ability to rush up and kind of stick and stay and be a factor in that race all the way to the wire. Fondly's nice. Yeah, again, this is kind of like a new-ish path to the Kentucky Oaks. So I think a lot remains to be seen of how successful these horses can be. But those silks always suggest she's a player. So I thought she ran fine. Um, our pace point suggested that she would be ahead early and she would do the best running late. And yeah, maybe debatable if she did the best running late, but he was able to wear down Anonyma and get the money. Pretty straightforward race, in my opinion. I don't know. Usually every week there's somebody in the comments telling me that I missed something while watching the replays, and um, you know, one, certainly possible. Two, we all watch racing differently, so there might be stuff that I see that you didn't see, or stuff that I saw that you don't necessarily think is important or agree with, which is the beauty of horse racing. Um, Fondly, she was fine. Um, I thought Anonyma was probably the most impressive horse in that race, and I'd be interested to see where she lands next and the competition she faces. But I'd like that one, moving forward. So one for the Equibase virtual stable, um, for me. All right, let's hop back. I'm gonna We'll talk about Getaway Car and American Promise and Render Judgment, who I was very interested to see how well he would run with the scratch of John Hancock, which really probably changed the dynamics of this race quite significantly. Without him in there, I thought he towered over this field, and um, I was going to make a nice win bet on him in this race. And then when he scratched, um, I wasn't as interested in playing the race. So let's take a look. And you have Getaway Car, which again was surprising. I didn't expect Getaway Car to want to be forwardly placed like this, but like I said with the prior race, you want to be aggressive in these spots. How often do we see horses, if they're good enough, blast out of the gate and be a factor in the race late? So um, I thought that was a decent tactic. So as we know, it didn't exactly work out. Same with this nine, Render Judgment. I was a little surprised that he wanted to be so up close, because he was a top late runner on our pace point sheet. So I was a little surprised that he wasn't a little bit further back, but I think he represented himself well. But American Promise, like, this horse just looked as cool as a cucumber. And you see those three or four horses in the back, they're already under a drive into this far turn. And American Promise just gets shown the crop at the top of the stretch, and he just turned it on, and he's running down the stretch here. And I'll be honest, didn't look didn't look super comfortable. I don't know if he didn't change leads, but doesn't look super smooth. And the rest of them just kind of plodding along. So I don't know what that says about what that says about the rest of the field. Their inability to make up any ground in the stretch. Um, One horse was, kind of, at least in my eye, did not look super smooth in terms of a stride going down the stretch. But again, maybe you see it differently. American Promise, nice horse. Um, this Render Judgment, though, was after the scratch of John Hancock, was number one on our um, late pace point ranking. And yeah, he didn't make up any ground in the stretch, but I thought he ran well to kind of hang on for that second. Um, Not sure I'd be interested in any of these horses moving forward. And you know, Getaway Car took a lot of money, especially after John Hancock scratched out of the race, and he just wasn't a good race for him. I don't think. I don't think he I don't think he represented himself well. And perhaps he's still trying to find himself, or maybe this just is what he is. But there's nothing in the PPs, at least in my view, or on the pace point sheet that would suggest that he would have been a major player in this race with John Hancock in or John Hancock out. And I think that kind of bore itself out. Um, let's let's take a quick break. I'm gonna get a sip of coffee. A little chilly here, but I do think we're hitting 85, 90 degrees down here in Texas. So we'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll dive into the pace points from this Colonial card because um, some interesting things that I want to share with each of you. So stick around. We'll be right back.
And they're off in the Kentucky Derby.
For some, they say it's the most exciting 2 minutes in sports. For us, it's about potential financial opportunities. Never bring a knife to a gunfight, and make no mistake, big money is up for grabs, and this is a fight. Never settle for second best. The Past the Wire annual Kentucky Derby seminar. Nobody does it better. Preparation is key. Be better prepared, delve deeper, stealth. They won't see us coming and they won't know we're there. Money management, ticket structure, pace, all the intangibles, thoroughgraph, everything that matters to make it count, to have that edge. In the end, if things go as planned, it'll be like we stole the money.
Grab your seats now. Best seminar in horse racing. Don't get shut out, as they say. As we're winding down to the gates flying open, you want to be there. So pastthewire.com, sign up for that. Let's take a look at the pace points. And one interesting thing, as I was watching some replays this morning, a lot of this stuff kind of held true. Some of the maiden races, like race 2, for example, I think that was a good example of where the top horse in the late pace point, so ranked 1, finished in the top 3 in just about every race. So when you use something like this, to me, the first fraction ranking. So obviously, here, let's look at the Virginia Oaks. Fondly, right? She shot out of there, and she was ahead early, and then Anonyma came up and challenged her. Anonyma was ranked 7th, so that was a little bit, the speed that she showed was a little bit out of character for her based on a variety of the data that John, myself, and nice guy Eddie C all look at to come up with these rankings every week. So that goes back to that earlier point I made about being aggressive in these races, and you will get rewarded. But for Fondly, we could have expected her to be on the lead, and we expected her to run the best late. And she did, and it bore that out, which was a positive if you're playing. Sure, she was low odds, but I think that helps kind of visualize what the race may or may not look like. So if you go back through this sheet, and like I was saying off the top of the segment, some of the maiden races where we only had data to go off of for a couple of runners might be a little bit difficult to get a full sense of how the race is going to set up from a pace point standpoint. But if you go back and look, the late fraction ranking the top horse. So whoever has this one in there, in that column, finished in the top three in just about every single race. So you've got good late runners running well enough to finish in the money and hit the board in those races. And I think leaning on these pace points kind of help identify that um, will be super helpful. Granted, there are some low price favorites and some low price horses in here, so we got to be smart about our wagering dollars. But again, this is kind of um, helping us navigate that final quarter mile and know who's going to be doing what towards the end of the race. Let's just look at the Virginia Derby. I thought this was interesting. Obviously, John Hancock scratched. I thought he was going to be a cinch in here. And if you look at the lengths lost in stretch, and of course we're talking hypotheticals here because John Hancock um, didn't run, but I do think that this is a good way um, to explain it. Um, you have this lengths lost in stretch column, and you have John Hancock listed at 0. So he, in our estimation, looking at all the data, me, John, Eddie C, put John Hancock as the best late runner in this race. So theoretically, everybody after him is going to be losing lengths in the stretch. But how many lengths they're losing, I think, is the key based on this data point that we're putting out. So render judgment, like 1.65 lengths, is not all that much. So the way I try to visualize this and the way I try to explain it to people who ask is it's not so much that, if those two horses were nose and nose at the top of the stretch, it's not that John Hancock would beat render judgment by, one and three quarter lengths almost. It's that render judgment would be kind of on par with John Hancock in that final fraction. So of course, as we get further and further distance wise here, lengths wise, you've got um, you've got calling card that theoretically could have ran a little bit better. You've got uh, a getaway car, 4 lengths, theoretically losing 4 lengths in the stretch, which, that might be where I would look a little bit closer, especially at a horse that is going to take a lot of money and say, 4 lengths is a good amount. So I think if you looked at the pace points, you would see getaway car might be a vulnerable favorite or a vulnerable low priced horse given his ranking in that final that that final quarter mile. Now, of course, I'm talking about this race, and American Promise looked like he was gonna lose 9 lengths in the stretch, and he gained 9 lengths. He put 9 lengths on the stretch on the field in the stretch. So um, you know, use this to your advantage. Again, there's a million things in the DRF and Brisnets that I might like that you might not like. So again, I think this gives this gives everybody a handful of additional data points to be able to determine what it is that they want to use. For me, I think the biggest key that I've seen in the last, me, John, Eddie C, we've been testing this thing since last summer, or the Keeneland Fall Meet. We've been tinkering with this, and we finally got it to a point where we feel confident enough to release it to the public over the last 2 weekends, and we've done that. And what I've seen from the cards that we've done in the last 2 weekends, that late last fraction ranking is a really good indicator of who's going to be doing the best running down the stretch. And like I said, I think 9 of the 10 races, the horse with the top ranking in that late fraction um, ended up hitting the board. So some good insight there, and that'll help you kind of navigate race flow and maybe some exotic wagers. This upcoming weekend, though, we've got a handful of Derby preps, so we'll have the cards out for all of those with the pace points available at passthewire.com. If you don't see them, reach out to me, reach out to John, and we'll make sure that we get it in your inbox for the big Derby and Oaks preps coming up over the next weekend. All right, one more quick break, and then we'll come back for the last sip. And I've got a couple of interesting things that I want to talk about, so stick around.
There's a lot of ways to handicap a horse race and a lot of ways to bet on it. But nobody that I know does it like Giosetti and his full card, precise order handicap. Every horse in the race gets a predicted order of finish like only Gio can do, way beyond a deep dive, available exclusively on select days at Past the Wire.
All right, welcome back. It's time for the last sip. We got the NHC going on in Vegas, and there's always been, the last couple of years, some sort of controversy around it. And I want to talk about that in the last sip. All right, let me preface this by saying I've never qualified for the NHC. I've come close, but I've never qualified for the NHC. I've never been to Vegas for this event. So take my comments for what it's worth, knowing that I have no experience playing in this event whatsoever. But what I'm going to talk about has nothing to do with being good enough to earn an entry into that tournament or participate in it in any such way. The mechanics of the whole thing is a little goofy. And, ITP on Twitter, love him or hate him, I think he does share a lot of great information and a lot of great wagering insights, betting theory, interesting stuff to think about and consider. And I think a lot of it is accurate. The takeout on this NHC stuff is like 34, 35%, which is kind of nuts. And I get it, right? It's one of two, maybe three. Some tracks are starting to roll out some of these bigger live money tournaments that are a little bit more dynamic and a little bit more better friendly than the NHC. But I get it, right? You pay a premium to be in the running for National Handicapper of the Year. Totally fine. But it just seems crazy that there's always issues. There's always issues. A year or two ago, you had a public handicapper using a proxy, and he wasn't even on site and got disqualified, and then went on like a Twitter rampage, and that was goofy. And then this year you got the guys from Barstool there. One guy's making bets under another guy's name, and sure, like if you don't think that this stuff is happening already, um, and I don't know, get out from underneath the rock that you're living on. And then there was, then there was like a tote error again somehow, and it's just like every year there's like an issue. So tying this back to the takeout bit, if they're taking 35%, like how is this stuff happening? You should have enough money on hand to not have everybody sitting around a bunch of folding tables in a conference room. You should have enough money to not have errors like this happen, or have like the betting errors that happened yesterday or the day before. Um, you should have stopgaps in place to prevent these things if you're taking out 35%. And yet it doesn't happen. And the response is always, sorry? What happened a couple of years ago in the Breeders' Cup with Modern Games? We're still waiting for that report on what happened. The statement they put out after that was, here's what happened. Yes, we were all watching. We know what happened. The statement does not tell us anything extra. And now, 2, 3 years later, we're still waiting to figure out what happened. The Tampa Bay Derby last year, the tote system crashes, blaming some third party. The NHC tote goes down. People can't make their not mandatory, they're optional bets on certain races. Oh, sorry. What? There should be stopgaps in place to prevent these things from happening, and there are not. And we're going to get to a point where people are going to be screwed out of millions and millions of dollars, which they've already been. And there's no safeguards in place. There's no accountability, and there's nothing to suggest that it won't happen again in the future. And maybe we're the stupid ones for continuing to play into it, continuing to not hold these people accountable, and we just take it, and at the next race at Mahoning Valley, like, I think everybody's kind of at fault here. The industry's at fault for not holding itself accountable first and putting systems in place to prevent stuff like this from happening, because it's happening all the time. And the horse players are at fault for continuing to feed money into these poorly run systems. And I hope something catastrophic doesn't happen with the tote system on a Derby day or a Belmont day, um, or a Preakness day. I smile because jokingly nobody really cares about the Preakness anymore. But that's for another last sip, maybe as we get through the Triple Crown. I was thinking about that, reading some stuff on Twitter yesterday about this tote issue at the NHC, and people getting screwed out of some winning bets that could put them in contention for this tournament. And the organizers are at fault, and the horse players are at fault, because everybody just keeps putting each other in positions to fail. That is it. We're at about 30 minutes. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. Go back, download the pace points. They're in the tracking trip section on pastwire.com from yesterday. Download them, review them, watch the replays, and see where you might be able to find some nuggets of information, some pearls of wisdom in the pace points as you watch the replays on the Amwager app, which all you got to do, I say this every week, all you got to do is just search the horse name, and all of their career races come right up. So, Shorebet Coffee, thank you, as always. Amwager, fantastic platform. Download it. Get your seat at the Derby seminar. Download the pace points. We'll see you back here next weekend after what should be an exciting final couple of weekends on the Kentucky Derby Trail. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next week.